I think Dolan's description of conspiracies is spot on. Any large organization, nation state, corporation, what have you, is conspiratorial by nature. A very small group of very powerful people making all important decisions in secret that will affect a very large group of people. Conspiracy for such organizations is a way of life. Also, as Dolan says, secrets don't need to be kept absolutely watertight. There will inevitably be some of it leaking out, but there's a whole hugely researched and resourced system to handle this problem. There's a network of perception managers, damage control teams, debunkers, etc. A kind of team of sophisticated plumbers who go to work when some unseemly information inevitably leaks out. Not to mention fake controlled leaks by the conspirators to generate more noise and confusion. I mentioned getting overwhelmed before. Anyone who looks deeply into our reality will go through different kinds of overwhelming periods as you try to assimilate all this pretty scary stuff. There's plenty of damn scary stuff in the data, hypotheses, and so on. Hyperdimensional overlords, secret government, covert war against normal humanity, total financial economic collapse, famine, disease, and natural disasters that may not always be so natural, all part of a huge population reduction program. Cyclic cosmic catastrophes, comets, meteors, asteroids, enslavement of all kinds. Would it have been better not to know? Well, I guess that depends on the person and where they are at in their lessons. I'll state some more Cassiopeanisms and Sothisms. The future is open. At chaotic times like this, the possibilities and probabilities for nonlinear dynamics greatly increase in complex systems. Small changes may make very big differences over time and distance in the system. If we can wake up more of our fellow brothers and sisters from their high-tech induced hypnosis, we can really increase the small changes that will produce big effects down the road. Do we want to cower and become totally engulfed in survival mode? Just simple physical survival, especially increasing the service to self-orientation of ourselves, and maybe even our slice of space-time, by an every man for himself attitude? I don't want to die just yet, but hey, I'm going to die sometime. So might as well try to be open, less constricted, less compulsively fearful, more service to others oriented, less identified and in confluence with the general negative turmoil swirling around this big blue marble of ours, while not denying that negative turmoil, but just as avoiding the denial of the negative, also seeing the amount of positive and potential positive as close to the objective balance as possible. We don't have to make unacceptable compromises with ourselves just to survive like pre-civilization man, so to speak. The signs are showing that we are at a time where we will have to make choices that could be thought of as the choice between the well-being of the soul and the well-being of the physical vehicle, the body. What are the compromises we are willing to make for the vehicle, which makes the soul lessons on this level possible to survive if making certain choices threatens the integrity of the soul itself? For myself, I want to be less mechanical, more conscious, more creative, less entropic. Definitely things look pretty ugly and are likely going to get worse before they get better. But all these frustrating, infuriating, frightening situations taken together are like a really good petty tyrant, as Don Juan Matus put it in Carlos Castaneda's writings. It is the perfect way to hone our warrior skills, if you will. When you are totally dedicated to being the best warrior for the growth and development of your soul that you can be, against these dark forces leading us astray, all these challenges are just a ticket. A very good quote from Don Juan is, "Only a warrior can survive the path of knowledge, because the art of being a warrior is balancing the terror of being a man with the wonder of being a man." Another good one is, "The basic difference between an ordinary man and a warrior is that a warrior takes everything as a challenge, while an ordinary man takes everything as a blessing or as a curse. These quotes are closely related to these from the Cassiopeans. Learning is fun, later elaborated as challenges are fun. And keep in mind, knowledge protects, ignorance endangers. Sure, lessons are painful, but once learned, that's where the fun part really starts. Whether it's learning to walk, learning to ride a bike, or learning big life lessons, after the initial bumps and bruises, the falling down and getting up, the fun part of applying the lessons begins, as well as helping others learn the lessons. All these threats and dangers were always present anyway. The only difference is now we are aware of them. I'd rather know. If a sheep became aware with stark clarity of why it has been fed and raised as it has been, would that sheep have the same destiny in the overall scheme of things? It seems to me that sheep would have certain choices in terms of what role it plays, choices that would certainly not exist for it without such an awareness. All our lives we're mechanically suffering anyway, which is useless suffering, or only useful in that at some point it will get you to the point of having had enough, having had your fill. Then you can start conscious suffering, intentional suffering, which is much more useful suffering, combined with conscious efforts. The strangest thing is, until we have reached that point of having had enough, many of us become attached to our useless sufferings, perhaps more attached than to anything else. And when opportunities come up to end them, we reject these opportunities strongly. What is useful suffering, you may ask? Some aspects of conscious suffering are going against certain mechanical reactions, tendencies, desires, likes and dislikes, whims, etc. Struggling against just being comfortable and feeling safe and doing what is familiar. Struggling not to be controlled by all the lower animal, instinctive, and biological tendencies that, when strongly identified with them, keep men at a lower state of being than the potential higher states. Also, keeping up conscious efforts to wake up, and when the awakening process starts, to keep up the efforts not to fall back asleep. A machine cannot be conscious. When a machine begins to be conscious, it is no longer a machine, or it is no longer the same machine and will eventually cease to be a machine. As our tendency toward automatic reactions decreases, we gradually acquire the ability to act instead of reacting. At first, we take the notion of being a machine on the level of mechanical thought only, on the level of the lower intellectual center. But eventually, we may feel and know this to be true with our whole being, that is, with all our centers. The framework of the instinctive motor center, lower emotional center, lower intellectual center, the sexual center, and the higher emotional and higher intellectual centers, and their functions and how these all work is explicated in the fourth way teachings. For those who think they want to start the work explicated by Gurdjieff and others based on the fourth way teachings, or have just started, I'll try to give a few pointers and guidelines that might help to get started. First, really get to know your machine. See how it works. Get to know all your contradictory small I's, all your routines and mechanical programs that constitute the false personality, or as many as you can. Don't identify with any of them. It may help to say it instead of I when you observe these, and just find other ways to not identify with the small I's, which you'll eventually observe are fighting to be king for some brief period. Just observe at first. When you see things that you don't like, whether they're stupid, selfish, self-centered, nasty, or whatever, don't try to change them in the beginning. You won't be able to anyway at first, and it's important to just record. Get enough data to have something to work on. Just often seeing and feeling things in yourself that you don't like is enough. It keeps you going in the direction of not being self-satisfied. But also be alert. you don't start self-justifications of all sorts. For a while, use your limited energy to observe without judgment, more objectively, your inner world. Get to know your machine like a good mechanic, so that eventually you'll be able to clean, fix, and reassemble it for better and even higher functioning. In the fourth way, you aren't supposed to do anything you don't understand. It takes a long time to reach understanding, and there are different levels of understanding. The fourth way teaching says that between knowledge and understanding, there is being. And knowledge and being must grow and advance in parallel to each other. First, you must gather and sort the knowledge. Then, by beginning to consistently do the exercises of self-observation and self-remembering, your being slowly begins to increase, rising to a higher level of being, eventually headed toward being with a capital B, allowing for more understanding. Also, as the process continues, you will become aware with your whole being of all the contradictory little I's, of being a machine that runs many different programs and gives certain reactions when certain buttons are pushed, when certain levers are pulled. When the process of mastering these reactions proceeds, whole new worlds and possibilities open up, and we gradually gain the ability to do, along with gaining a higher capacity to be. As this is in progress, as our super efforts to gain mastery over ourselves, to become captains of our soul, so to speak, begin to bear fruit, we can experience firsthand the difference between the mechanical way everything just happens and the ability to do. In our ordinary condition, the ability to act from a consistent foundation of values and knowledge will seem miraculous compared to our conditioned reactions. And a recent development at Cassiopeia over the last year or so is the breathing and meditation program called Éirí Wolas, which is Irish Gaelic for growth of knowledge, an ancient system reassembled that really speeds up the process of the work on the self, processing and removing toxic emotions from past traumatic experiences that block our growth, greatly reducing the negative effects of stress by regularly stimulating the vagus nerve and healing mind, body, and soul. When you get stuck, as you will from time to time, after having made some progress due to long and proper conscious efforts, remember that there are different lines in the work. When you get stuck in the work on yourself, do some work for the group or work with others, and you will be able to start making progress again. And you will also be paying back to the group for all you've received. Remember that no one can do the work by themselves. An objective network of collinear people is needed, all committed to getting as close to the objective truth as possible and helping others do the same. In my opinion, it makes sense to start working on yourself first, but that might not always be the case. You may be able to do some useful work for the group first, and then start on yourself and get benefits from the work you did for the group. But don't put off doing the work on yourself. Do what you can. Start somewhere and avoid the disease of tomorrow, to use Gurdjieff's term. And as Gurdjieff said, a student that can't be useful to himself can't be useful to the teacher. And in this case, the research network is the teacher. Also, if you're making proper efforts, you will not notice progress for some time, maybe for a long time, but there will be slow, steady progress that becomes evident later.